Hey everyone, welcome to another Azure Infrastructure Update, and this is for mid-April. And as always, please keep those comments coming in, give me your feedback, and I'll send you on these challenge coins. And I'm not going to lie, it's pretty quiet out there. Obviously we have all of this terrible virus things going on, so I think the big focus is on stability. On capacity. So we're not seeing a ton of new features over the last couple of weeks. We'll see what happens longer term. But there is some cool new stuff. This isn't brand new, but I really wanted to make sure I pointed this out, that people were aware this was out there. And this is Azure Active Directory multi-factor authentication for everyone. Now, when I think about why is MFA this big deal, they've shown that multi-factor authentication defeats about 99.9% of attacks. So it's this really important thing to have. And a lot of companies have Azure Active Directory Premium. They have the ability to use MFA, and they're not. So for those companies, hey, get MFA deployed, get conditional access set up, and use MFA in an intelligent manner. For companies that don't have Azure AD Premium, well, now I can get access to MFA. And the way this surfaces is, before it was premium only, or global admins could also use MFA. There are now these security defaults. So for my Azure AD tenant, if I'm not using conditional access, if I'm using conditional access already, I cannot turn this on. But if I'm not, if I don't have premium, I can actually go and turn on these security defaults. This is going to do a few things. So it's now going to make my users register for MFA within 14 days. Now that 14 days is per user. So from their next interactive logon, that 14-day timer starts. They have to go and configure MFA. Now with this, I have to use the Azure Authenticator app notifications. That's all I can do. I can't use codes, I can't use text messages, I can't use phone calls, I don't get app passwords if I was doing legacy authentication, which we don't want to do anyway. I would need regular Azure AD Premium and regular conditional access to get those things. So it's via the Authenticator app notification. It's going to pop up, say, hey, did you do this? So I'm going to use that application. I can turn it on for everyone. For privileged roles, there's a bunch of these. There's things like global admin, SharePoint admin, Exchange admin, conditional access admin. There are others. They're in the documentation. They will always have to do MFA. If I want to do Azure management, if I'm using the portal, PowerShell, CLI as a regular user, I'm going to have to MFA. It's also going to block legacy authentication. Legacy authentication cannot use MFA. And so it's going to turn that off. So I can go into my Azure AD tenant, I can turn on these now security defaults, and I'll now get these configurations. So it's a great feature. If you're not doing MFA today, if I don't have access to premium, I can now actually get MFA and those configurations free of charge. So go do that. If you do have premium, you've not done MFA, go do that. Azure Spot virtual machines have gone generally available. So these give me really cheap use of extra of the spare Azure capacity. So you imagine the whole point of Azure is it's consumption based. There are times it's busier than others. So in those quieter times where it has a bunch of spare compute, it's going to encourage you to use it. Now the price of these Spot VMs differs over time. How much spare capacity is there? What type of virtual machine? What region? All of these different things. And what I can do is I can essentially set a maximum price I want to pay per hour. So this is useful for workloads could be interrupted, because remember, it's a Spot VM. If the price goes above what I'm willing to pay, I'll get this 30-second notification and it's going to be turned off. So this is where I can afford for that workload to be stopped if I don't maybe need it. It's not urgent, it's doing something that can take a bit of extra time if it gets stopped, if it gets interrupted. So again, I specify the maximum price per hour I'm willing to pay. As long as the price stays below that, it will keep running. If I want to use like virtual machine scale sets, I cannot mix. I cannot mix regular virtual machines and Spot VMs in the same virtual machine scale set. Remember, with virtual machine scale set, I specify a gold image, I set minimum and maximum numbers. I set scale actions, maybe schedules, maybe CPU, maybe queue depths. So I can't mix them. If I wanted to get the best of both worlds, I would have a virtual machine scale set with my regular virtual machines in it. And then I would have another virtual machine scale set with the spot VMs, realizing those may come and go at any time. So Azure Managed Disks have actually got a bunch of new stuff. So direct upload is now GA. So previously I couldn't just upload to a managed disk. Well, now I can. One of the challenges of a managed disk is I don't see the storage account it lives in. It is living in a storage account, but I don't see it. So what we can now do is create an empty managed disk of the size of the VHD we want to upload. We get a writable shared access signature to that empty disk. Then I can use AZ copy, I think it's version 10 or above, and I can write my VHD into that empty managed disk. So now I can actually directly upload into a managed disk. I don't have to do these in-between steps. Shared managed disks are in preview. I did a separate video about sharing managed disks. It's totally cool. I can now do clusters that want a shared disk in Azure. I can now do server-side encryption with a customer managed key. Now the way we do this is I think about, I have the key I want. Maybe I'm bringing it into Azure Key Vault, or I'm just generating it in Key Vault. I create a disk encryption set. And that disk encryption set links to a key vault and a particular key URL. That disk encryption set gets a system managed identity, so it's an identity known to my Azure AD, and I give it permissions to the key vault. I then create the managed disks, and when I'm doing that creation, I put them in the disk encryption set. Well, now it will actually go and use that key that it's been associated with. It has the rights by that managed identity to go and get to the key. So it can wrap and unwrap the actual key used to encrypt the actual data on disk. So now I can pass my own custom managed key for that server-side encryption. Remember, this is server-side. It's not inside the guest OS. It's not BitLocker. It's not dmcrypt. That's separate. This is actually on the Azure storage, that's server-side. I can now do incremental snapshots. So before, a snapshot was always the complete size of the disk, and I would pay for that. Now I'm just going to pay for the delta. And there are these new smaller disks, the P1, P2, P3, 4, 8 and 16 gigabytes, and they all support burst. So what's really cool is all of these up to, I think, the P20, they now support bursting. So bursting is the idea, I have a certain amount of IOPS and throughput based on the disk size. That's always available to me. If I use less than that, well, I start to accrue credit. I accrue IOPS credit. I accrue throughput credit. And then once I've accrued that credit, if I get a busier time, I can burst up to, I think it's 3,500 IOPS. I can burst up to 170 megabytes for up to 30 minutes or until the credit I've accrued has run out. So it's kind of a cool capability that I can have that now. I have these bursting. Azure Networking, IPv6 has gone GA. So it's IPv6 in my virtual network. So now my virtual network, as part of the IP ranges I can add to a virtual network, I can now put in IPv6 ranges. My subnets can now check a little box and say, hey, I want to have an IPv6 address with this subnet as well. My load balancers support IPv6. My public IPs, I can have IPv6 versions. ExpressRoute today does not support IPv6. That's sort of coming down the line. The VMs are dual stack, so I cannot do IPv6 only. A lot of the management fabric, that's still using IPv4. So when I turn on IPv6, it is dual stack of the guest. The guest gets IPv4 and it gets IPv6. I don't have to redeploy to use IPv6. I may have to reboot. It depends on the DHCP stack inside the guest operating system. But that's the worst case. I never have to redeploy the virtual machine. I reboot, the DHCP stack will now get the IPv4 and the IPv6. And that's it. I kind of said it was quiet. I hope this was useful. Please subscribe, like, comment, share. And obviously it's super crazy out there. Take care of yourselves, take care of others. And I'll see you in a couple of weeks. Take care.